So now continuing the part with how you should write quality code. Okay, we remained at the fact that you shouldn't forget that when you divide two integer numbers, you remain just with the int part. So the result will be 2, not 2.5, because you should make the input number, okay, which is this 5 to be double, or you delete by a double number and then the result gets transformed. Then you also need to think of integer overflow. What you can also do is to use, for example, the Java style, and also you shouldn't repeat yourself when you have your code. So always create methods such that whether you want to use it repeatedly, okay, you don't need to write the same code again and again. Also, you should comment just where you should, not when it's obvious. Then you also have to test each and every method such that you can fail fast and you can simply identify the vulnerabilities of your program, and in this way you find out which are the problems which you should mitigate in the shortest time possible. Also, you will have numbers, so you shouldn't avoid like magic numbers. Let's say you have a number A, B, C, and it makes no sense. So whether you have something like pi and you use it from the math.pi, so you need to declare it. It was over here. As you can see, you have a double pi. So please put Sorry, I'm at the faculty and the internet simply dropped suddenly. Strange. Okay, it should display the screen, seems okay. So coming to not repeating yourself, so you shouldn't add the same function placed twice inside the code and just simply changing your name or having, let's say, some 1, 2, 3 and like trials. Okay, then you should just comment where it is needed. Okay, when you have methods, classes, you can also have the Java documentation. But here, when you have something like you want to test when n, okay, you would be different than 1, you want to perform some body method inside it. Okay, you shouldn't comment something like this because it is very obvious that you simply check this condition. Or in some place, it would be necessary. Like here you have the day of week. Some people in different countries, they have the first day of week, which is Sunday and not Monday. So you should pay attention to this. Okay, because you can want to check whether they are on holiday or not, or if they work. And if you start in a different manner, like having the first as being Sunday, this can cause a lot of problems. As well as, okay, so don't add something like this, which is obvious as being like, this is a cat, or this is a variable, which I have a for loop and I start from the value 0 and I go until the end of the array. So it makes no sense. Okay. Then you want to fail fast, such that you can simply identify which are your bugs, why it doesn't work, and you simply need to check firstly which are the arguments that the method receives, whether they are of that type. So it is like here I have a string and a double. So these are the values that I need such that I initialize the parameters of my class employee, which are name and salary. Okay, so also you want to identify all these weak points from time, because else this would cost a lot. Because you will have to rewrite the code, you will have customers who complain, and you will waste a lot of hours because your code, the whole code will need to be updated, and it will cause a lot of discomfort. Then for it, you also don't want to have these magical numbers like here. You have this 5. Why do you have this 5? What does it, which is the meaning? Okay, so you should add a certain variable, and inside that variable you store the value, the limit, and based on the limit you just parse the whole array. So even here, when you have the month equal to 2, you don't know from which position you start, whether it is February, whether it is March. So keep in mind that because these change from country to country and how you store the indices, it should be really clear. Then you have, for each variable, you have a certain purpose, such that you don't reuse your parameters or your variables inside it again and again. Okay, so inside it, you can also have final method parameters, like whether you want them to remain like that and not to be changed, like this name to remain final, and when you want to set the name of the same person, it will not let you. Okay, you can remain with the first name, but okay. The last name, when you want to change it, you need to check it before if there was some marriage or based on some legal paper, what happened. Then you also have, in this case, as you've seen with the static, this is when you call it with static without having an instance of the class, and you have the class name, and you can call your static method based on a final parameter which will not change. Okay, so when you provide the value for param, you will not be able to update it inside the method. Also, you have your good name, so it should be by default, you should know what it means. So if you put something like TMP, what is it? Is it temperature or something like you have degrees or like what changed? Okay, so here you will have the seconds per day. So whether it is the time, you should know what it means. Even if you call it time, you still don't have the significance for it. Then you have the white spaces. So as you can see, even for a 4, you will have to add the spaces for I equal to 0. So when you have your loops, okay, like here, you need to visualize what exists inside. So you have white spaces as well as you have these tabs. So you are inside 4, and this is why you have this space before it. So you know that you are inside the body of your for loop. Okay, and being inside it, here you will go through all the elements of your array A, knowing that the first element is on position 0, you go until length. You cannot use length itself, so you cannot add the equals over here. And for it, you want to see whether the element, whether you can divide it by 2 or not. So if A of I modulus 2 equals 0, then the sum will be incremented and you will know how many even numbers you've got. So you will have tabs, and you should not mix the tabs with white spaces. Okay, so don't, because here, if you have an enter and then I have tab and then I have some space, it's not all right, because then you should remember how many times you pressed on space on these white spaces. So no, use just tabs. And inside the force, you have the white spaces. Okay. And also, you shouldn't use global variables because they simply change, and you can have several processes which change them. And this is when you should have parameters for your methods, as well as you have your return values. So for each employee, you have exactly your parameters, and whether you do have a return type, like here I have name, so you should return the current name of the person, and the return type will be string. Okay, like for the salary, you will return a value which is of type double. Okay, so here when you want to return a result, like you return salary, you don't have also to print it. Okay, so don't also display here the value, because else in the terminal you will have a lot of prints and it will simply be a whole mess. Because even when you will want to see whether you have an error or not, you will be confused by the whole results which are displayed. As well as you see here that your method, the result, can be further on used, and this is when you should make it reusable, so more modular. Okay, and also based on it, according to the program, you can interact based on the console. So you can read a value, you can use it onwards and display which would be the final result. Okay, which having it returned, you can display a value or you can use it further to have a computation. Then, when you have your code validation, it means that you need to check it. So you need to check it whether it's correct or not, based on the reasoning, whether it returns the right value. Okay, so always when you have the for loop and you have the length for a certain array, you shouldn't add manually 6, because this one can change and you can change it dynamically afterwards. So you need to use the numbers.length without any round braces at the end. Also, you need to review the code. So somebody else can read the code, they can ask you some questions, and based on the feedback, you can update what already exists. Okay. Then when you want to do the testing, so you will have several inputs based on several types to see which would be the output, and you check the results. You can also make them to be automated, okay, with JUnit testing, or you can do it manually by reading from the keyboard. Then you can have the test driven. So you have the test before you have the program. So it means that you need to think of the method and how it is specified. Also, for that method, you have several tests. And based on the tests that you want to perform, then you do the actual coding. So first of all, whenever you have a requirement, you need to think which is the context. You should understand the context, and then you split the problem into subproblems, such that based on each subproblem, you create tests, and after you know exactly what the test should do, you can act and you can write the code for it. Then when choosing the tests, so you can have a small test to validate the program, and you have this whole input split into subdomains. So whether you want it to be one test case or you want to be multiple tests. So for example, if you want to multiply two numbers, like you have a big integer a and b, you have several scenarios wherein you have both numbers to be positive, or you have a and b as both negative, or you have one of the numbers a or b as being positive. Then you can also have other numbers, like you have a or b to be or 0 or 1 or -1, meaning that the result with 0 would anyway be 0. With 1 means that the value of the other number remains unchanged and it is returned. Or you have a -1, so it means that you simply change the sign. Also, you can have the numbers which can be small or as well as too big. So maybe their absolute value even exceeds the maximum value which is allowed based on the type, like the max value for these ones which were presented here, the minimum value, maximum value for integer, and we also have a double with minimum value. So you should keep in mind that you have all these ranges. Then for the tests, even for these numbers for a and b, so remember that with 1, if you have it, it all depends on a. Then with 0, the result remains 0. With -1, you would have a negative number. Also, it depends how you obtain it. So whether it is for both values for a and b, you can have also positive and negative numbers, as well as you have it for the other number. So according to it, you would obtain, being a multiplicity, the probability is higher to obtain a high positive number or high negative number. Okay, so this is why you have these ranges which are greater, because it's a multiplicity, and you can exceed very easily the maximum and the minimum values. Okay, and these are just by default how they would be placed, whether it's a large number or positive number for each category. Okay. Also, when having these tests, you also have your boundaries. So when you have also 0, it is simply the boundary between a positive number and a negative number, as well as you have the minimum and maximum values for an int and a double. So here I know that I did compute the minimum maximum values. Okay, it was somewhere. This is based on point. It is here. The array. Okay, two-dimensional matrix. Okay, this is the one with min max. So when you have something like this and you want to get the minimum value of an array as well as the maximum value of an array, what you need to do is to start with minimum as being the maximum element, so not the minimum one, and the maximum to be the minimum value such that it will be updated. Or you can put them both to be equal to the first element with which you compare. Okay, and you see how they are placed. Here, when you have something like this, you need to know the type. So being an integer, being a double, because you have other boundaries. So you've seen here that for different types, you have different boundaries, and this is whether you accept them or not. So even the minimum and the maximum value as a variable, they should be of the same type as the elements of your array. Then you also have the case when this list is empty. So you can have an empty string, a null string, you can have an empty list or an empty array. And whether you want to access some elements, you won't have what to call. So you will have also an index out of bounds. Whether you did have some elements, you deleted them, and then you want to get a certain element. So keep in mind that you also have boundaries inside the collection between the first and the last element. So whenever you want to parse it, to parse a collection, first of all, you need to check whether you do have any element, and then you can go further. Or even if you want to get a minimum and a maximum element, again, you should assure yourself that you do have elements inside, or else you should just display a warning such that the user will know why the error was returned. Then you have the testing, which can be of type black box testing, or you have the white box testing. So for the black box testing is when you have a specification and you know which are the methods. So you know that you have some method like inside, let's say, employee or debit card with this credit card. I know that I have the withdraw. Okay, and I know that I have the withdraw of sum. And for the debit card, it will show an error or whether it's successful. So I know what I should obtain, and I know that I provide a sum which is of type integer. So if I provide here a double, I know why the error was caused. So for the black box testing, it means that you can call all these methods, but you do not know the implementation. So everything that is inside the method, you just see it in this way, okay? You have the public void withdraw of int sum. What I have here, I do not know, but this is how you can test it, and this is the white box testing. While the white box testing is when you do see the content. So black is when you don't see, white is when you see everything inside and it's crystal clear how it is performed and why the result was returned. Okay, so it will simply know what happened and what was tested, and you can visualize it. Okay, so you have it step by step. If something has any mistake, you can identify it, while with the black box testing, you just call a function and you don't know anything about it behind it. Then for a test, you need to have the coverage for it. So you think like this: if each and every statement which exists inside it is run by your test case or not. So like here with the withdraw, whether you are inside a debit card and you want to withdraw, you need the amount that you want to withdraw. It needs to be greater, okay, than the sum. So then the maximum threshold. So you should just take away money based on the limit, based on what you have. So whether it's a debit card, you have a maximum threshold according to it. So whether you have the amount that you have available being less than the sum that you want to take out, you don't have it. While for the credit card, it means that you will want to withdraw, and you will have the amount which you've got, the amount that you want to take away, and whether it exceeds the maximum credit that you can have, then you have an error. As well as if not, if you didn't reach the maximum credit, then you can add the amount inside it. So you get the current amount, you have the sum, which you want to take away and buy something, and you just update the value of the money that you owe to the bank. Okay, so this is the case when you know that each and every statement is run. So whether this field is true, then it goes here. If not, in else, it goes over here. And then when if finishes, then it doesn't have any more what to do. So it will exit. So this is how you need to figure out if you have some code inside else that should be also executed for if, then you place it after the if branch outside. Okay. So this would be code to be executed after the if else control. Okay. So no matter whether it's true or false, you will have something to be executed and you can compute it. Maybe you want to store it in another table and to have this transaction stored. Okay. Then you also have the branch coverage. So you have it, whether you have an if or you have a while, so to go through multiple statements. See whether you do enter the true branch and whether you do enter the false branch, because maybe sometimes you will never enter it. So if you put some value like whether it is true, so while one will always run and it will be an infinite loop. So you should know exactly which are the cases when you should enter those directions and if they are indeed entered. Okay, because maybe it will never be true and you won't execute it. Also, you have the path coverage. So you know which are the branches, the functions, how they are called inside the program and how everything flows. So which is your input and what happens after that. You want to withdraw, it is like here. Okay, I need to update the sum, or maybe you want to store it inside a file, or you want to notify. Let's say that someone wants to take out based on the credit card, but they don't know the PIN code. So you have several paths of how the program should behave. And when you have in industry, you want to have this statement coverage of being of 100%, such that you enter each and every test and they are validated. As well as for critical software, you have the coverage per branch, which is also of 100%. Okay, so just to identify critical situations when they are simply triggered and if they display some vulnerable information, like maybe you want to withdraw and then you say that your PIN is not correct, you should have entered I don't know what value of PIN, and again it is not safe. So keep in mind that you have these critical software, so maybe you have a password which is very weak, a default password like 1234, and again you should have all these tests which are covered. Then you will have your automated testing. This is when you have JUnit, and inside JUnit you can simply have the tests which are added and you have them one by one, such that you can identify whether you do have a bug or not. So for example, I have this lab 7, and here what you need to do is to go to project structure, and you have a plus here, and you would say that you want to take it from Maven and to install JUnit. Okay, so this one will provide you the options. And for this example, it was used the version 4.13.2. So you have several options which are available. Let's see, I will put it here. Okay. So this is how you can do. You go to project settings. Okay, you have libraries. Then you have this plus. Okay, for plus you will have Maven. And with Maven, okay, you will have to add JUnit, and here you will have exactly the version that you need to select. Okay, I will put it here in chat. Okay, so based on it, you will also have from file, you go to file project structure. You also have the modules, so you know that inside it you have the main, and you, let's say this is the one, and you make it to be tests. So you know that inside Java you have sources, inside Lab 7 you have tests. Okay, and this is how you set the structure for it. Okay, so you put it as being test. Okay, in green, and in Java you have your SRCs. Okay. And for it, what you can do is, okay, you have a multiplication test. And for this multiplication test, this one is a package. All right, so set the package as being, okay. So here you have the multiplication test, whether you do want to multiply two numbers, A and B, and based on it you have the test. So you have an instance of the class and you have a message, and you have this assert equals. And you can have the ignore such that it won't be executed, or you can have the test and it will be analyzed. And now you want to see which is the result of 10 times 0, whether it is 0, by calling the method which is multiply of the two of them. So if I run it, okay, then it says that both tests are true, because here it's also 0. But if I put this one as being 1 and I run it, okay, the first one will fail because the expected value was 1, but in fact it has to be 0. Okay. And it says also why it failed. So it failed because of this computation that I want to perform, 10 times 0. Okay, but what I can do is also to ignore it. And when ignoring it, this one, the first one, won't appear anymore. We have just one test which finished successfully. Now you can do it. Okay. And I add over here. Then what you can also have is to have a double degree. Okay, let's see. We have this one again. And being with double degree, I want to have inside, so I have a second degree equation, so that I have two solutions, which are minus b with plus minus. Then you have your delta over 2a. So inside the delta you have b squared minus 4ac. And for your solutions, you see that you need to provide your coefficients, and your coefficients are a, b, and c, such that a is for x to power 2, then you have b being the coefficient of x, and c being the coefficient of x to power 0. So here you compute which would be the two values that you can have, solution 1 and solution 2. And based on it, you want to see whether it is an integer solution, so whether the result equals, okay, a real solution. And you don't want it to be infinite, so you don't want to divide by 0, which would be infinity. And now you will say that the solution 0, the first solution, will be equal to the integer value of R1. Or if not, you have the value as being 0. And the same is done for the second value. Then what you will do is to have your tests. And based on the tests, you have this assert equals. So here you have x squared minus 4. And this means that your solutions will be plus minus 2. And here you will have a, the coefficient a being 1 because it's x squared. B does not exist because we don't have any member of your equation which is equal to x. So this means that b is 0. And at the end we have the coefficient for x to power 0, which is minus 4. Now I want the first solution for it because see, over here we have a method which is double degree equation. And for the double degree equation, what I return is an array of solutions. So I have several solutions which are returned. And for it, you see that you return both of them. And this is why you've got the square brace of 0 to get the first solution. And then I have the second solution. And I test it one by one. And here we have another one. Now we also have b. So it means that you write it as being a equal to 1. You have b equal to 6 because you have 6x. And at the end, my c will be 9. And in this case, you will have the values as being minus 3. Then you also have another equation where you also have a coefficient for x to power 2. So it can be 2 multiplied by x to power 2, you can have the 7x, and then you also add 3. So you want the first and the last solution. So if I would like to test it, okay, we have test, okay, this one being unique, which worked. If I put here a minus and being the first solution, it will say why it failed. So it failed for x power 2 minus 4. The expected solution is minus 2, but okay, but the actual one is 2. So it means that over here, so if I change it again here, okay, let's say that I don't see that it's the first one. I see it as being the second. It also says which is the line which caused it. So if I look here, it says line 42. So the actual one should be 2. Okay. And it failed here such that the whole test failed. And now when I run it again, okay, I have my other line, which is 43, such that on line 43, so you see whether it crashes once, it will show you the message at the first crash, so like it happened here. And now we are over here, this one should be minus 2 and not 2. So if I run it and I test it, okay, it will be validated. So the test has passed. Okay, and this is how you have to test it. Any questions regarding this part? So this is your unit testing for each and every function. And when using assert equals, you test those functions which have the add test. Okay, you have the add test, it knows that it's a JUnit test, and you assert equals based on a certain function, okay, that exists at the level of the class, which is double degree. Questions based on this example or the previous one? This is how you test with JUnit testing one by one, this automatic testing. Okay. And you don't need to write the text, I mean the whole test and like, okay, you get this value and this value and that. You just have this assert equals based on the message. So what causes exactly the error based on what you want to compute. You have the expected value and you also have it as an output of a certain function. Okay, like this one with a double degree. And we have two values, solution 1, solution 2, which are computed by the method, which is this double degree equation. Then what you have is also the regression testing. So it means that you run your test whenever you have any change. And this is when you want to identify and fix bugs when you have new features added. Okay, as well as when you have a bug and you find it and you fix it, you also wanted to catch this case and to have an automated test such that your mates can also validate it, whether they have a new functionality for the whole application. Also, you have bugs such that you can have a list. So here you have a list of integer values. You cannot have a list of lists. You have a list of array list, and you can add numbers over here. You don't have a limit. And for this integer, you see that you add a number 3, a number 5. You can also have this set of 0, 9, meaning that firstly for your array list, on position 0, I allocate the number which is 3. And then on position 1, I allocate the number which is 5. Then I want for this position, on position 0, to store a new value which is 9, such that the reference towards 3 will be deleted and with what remain will be exactly the value 9. Then what you can have is also in case of strings, you can have a string S and this one to be A. Then when you want for S to add another string like B, you won't have anymore the reference towards the string A, so the garbage collector will appear and this string will be cleaned, and you just have the reference towards a string which is AB. Okay, but here, when you have a list of an array list, the instance remains the same. It is the same instance which you update according to a certain index that you want, like this one on position 0, to add a new value which is 9. Then you have immutability. So this is when you have multiple threads and you want to protect them from threads such that you don't have a mutation. So you can have another class which calls your code. And this is the case when you also reach some performance organizations. So for example, you have a string S and inside it, you want to add the value A 1000 times. So think about what happens behind. It will create again and again a new instance which will simply be erased afterwards, but you will have to allocate space for each and every value. Okay. So you need to also think about it. Or you can also have this immutable class. You've got a planet, and based on planet, you've got a name, a size, and you have the time when it was discovered. So for it, you provide the constructor for name, size, when the planet was discovered, as well as for the Gregorian calendar. Okay, you display the value. So this is with name, size, discovered. Then you have when it was discovered, and you will have a constructor for it. You will have for a planet, you have Earth as the name of your planet. You have a dimension as well as Gregorian calendar. and it will tell you exactly which is the year. Okay. Okay, so you have a month, you have a date, okay, and for it, you can also get the time zones, you can display the name for it. Let's see. And you can even see the date. So this is a date which is associated when you run it, okay, based on the offset and which are all the parameters. You have start date, start year, how you start each and everything, okay, which would be the values for them. Okay. So this is how you can store it, and it will exist based inside the Gregorian calendar. Okay. And we have the value which is just returned to you. Okay, such that it won't be the system date, it will be the one that you provide. So keep in mind that if some dates exist, like for some employee, you should add for them or for your client, you should just call and receive the new value that should be added. Then when you have this incremental development, so you have parts by parts and you update your software, you make it more complex, you need to test the whole code as you simply increment. Okay, because you can have some bugs in some places and they will simply propagate from one method to another and you will not understand which is the cause behind it. Such that you need to use a modularity, you have components that you need to set and to have them isolated. So this is like inside the package, you have several classes and how they are simply put differently, like you have car, this is abstract, and then I have a credit card such that I will extend, as well as for debit card I also do the same with extend, and then how you can call each and every one of them, as well as you define interfaces. So you have methods and you don't have the logic behind it. So this is like a black box testing. You know that you have a void, withdraw, and you should provide an InkSum parameter. So keep in mind that you have all these components, and whether you want to get details from an employee, you have here the getters and setters, not somewhere else. Then you also have the encapsulation, such that you want to think about parameters which are private. So here you have the private name, you have the private salary, ID, which would be the next ID, and you don't want them to be seen from outside, just from that instance of the class. As well as for your variable scope, so you should keep it as low as possible. So it should be just inside a for loop. Okay, like here you have an element and this is just a variable scope. So it exists inside this for loop where you take element by using the two dots and you simply navigate through all the elements of the array numbers of integers. So firstly, when using them, you first need to declare them. So I need to have this int of L, because if I leave it just in this way, it will not know it anymore. So this L, it cannot resolve it. So as you can see, you have the local variable, which you should name and to simply initialize such that it knows what to do. Like here, you initialize I with 0. Okay, and you should avoid these global variables that are updated by different processes. All right, so for now, you can have a break and then